I did get Les's tweet today at me, at Mike Gill Show, and I have all the pens here, Les. See, I got all my pens that you recommended that I use for my hat or my visor.
Your visor, yeah. Like Nick Sirianni, yes.
That's right. So I got a plethora of these pens, right? Look at all these pens that I'm rocking here.
That is an official plethora, I would say. Yes.
With that being said, is Nick Sirianni going down the dangerous path of being known more for things like his pens and his T-shirts than the way he is coaching this football team?
Well, he needs to win some games, and I think a lot of that criticism will dissipate. I don't think anybody will care about things like that. But when you lose, everything is up for grabs. And, it's these last two losses so ugly, so memorably ugly. Two very tough teams to play against right now, but still just awful games in terms of results for the Eagles. And, he's feeling the heat.
Now, you've been around a lot of coaches and, how they handle this kind of stuff. How is he some people are tweeting. I said, is it me or does he look like he's aged like 25 years already through 4 weeks? Like, how is he handling the initial, 4 weeks of you guys?
I don't see it as think he's handling it poorly. I don't know if he was really prepared for this market and what it's like. And, he kind of comes off as more of a college rah-rah kind of guy who maybe expects a little more encouragement than what we generally bestow upon people who are losing here. But I don't think he's losing it. I don't think his explanations are still, he's not throwing up his hands and, banging his head on the desk in public or anything like that. I think he's hanging in there pretty well. He doesn't seem to shave much before his press conferences, which leads to a bit of the perception that you were mentioning about how he looks a little haggard.
Now, your partner, Rob Motti, who's down in Florida now, and he says, look,
Yes.
I'm going to a press conference he was at last week. I think it was Thursday. And he went to a press conference of Tom Brady, who's returning to New England after an illustrious career there, you might have heard. He said he says, Les, they had about 20 reporters there. 20 for Tom Brady returning to New England. Is there too much coverage of this particular team? Is that an actual problem?
Well, people care. I mean, that's what I always said when I covered the Eagles for the Inquirer. I was one of 3 or 4 people the last several years covering the Eagles. And the reason is people care. 3 or 4 people at that particular place. There's any given day when they have interviews, there's 30, 40 reporters at Eagles. That is not the case in every market in the NFL, but I don't think there's too much coverage of the Eagles. I don't think there's ever too much. I mean, in Philly, no.
Then not too much, but as you mentioned, you kind of hinted at, is that maybe Nick and Jonathan Gannon today and Shane Steichen, like, you're not prepared for what you're about to get into.
Right.
And it almost feels like, even though the fans were aware that this team wasn't supposed to be very good, when the moment hits you that your team is not good, you're not prepared for that, and you become irrational. And that's where Gannon and Steichen and Sirianni, that's where they're not prepared, is that the fans aren't ready to manage the expectations.
Well, let's clear something up. I'm seeing a lot of, particularly people who I would say maybe are Eagles apologists, either consciously or unconsciously, not you, but I mean fans. Mm-hmm. I'm getting a lot of on Twitter, well, we knew that this was going to be the way it would be. Now, I thought the Eagles would win maybe 7, 8 games this year. I guess they still can, but it sure doesn't look promising in that regard. I didn't think they would, get blown out 2 games in a row like this. 9 out of 10 third downs converted Sunday. When have I ever seen that? I don't remember. This defense was supposed to be greatly improved with the addition of Steven Nelson, with some of the draft picks they made, with Javon Hargrave being healthy for a full year. There were a lot of nobody expected the Super Bowl, nobody expected the playoffs, but this is not supposed to be a terrible team. And if it is a terrible team, there's going to be a lot of consequences. Jalen Hurts needs to prove that he's the quarterback for the future. Nick Sirianni needs to prove that he knows what he's doing. Jonathan Gannon needs to prove that he can use the resources that he has, like Fletcher Cox and Darius Slay, which he doesn't seem to have any idea how to use right now. It's not just, oh golly, nobody thought this team was going to be any good. Let's just give up 40 every week.
Right.
That's not how I saw the season.
Well, that's an interesting because, the first 2 weeks, their defense looked much improved. The last 2 weeks, they gave up 83 points. So are we judging them based on the top of the mean here? They played Dallas and Kansas City. Those two teams have a little different expectations. When you played San Francisco and Atlanta, you seemed competitive. So with that, is this team going to be competitive based on what we saw? Because you're not playing Kansas City and Dallas every week. That's just not, So should we expect more competitiveness from that defense moving forward?
Boy, I sure hope so. And again, the schedule doesn't do them a lot of favors. It's last year I thought they had a real problem whenever they remember they went out to San Francisco and won last year early in the season. And I thought, well, they'll get something going here. The offense looks decent. And the next 2 weeks they were playing a very good Steelers team and a very good Ravens team. And it just never got going. And this year looks kind of the same. You look at this, Dallas and Kansas City. Carolina's 3-1. They're going to Carolina. Carolina finally lost for the first time last week to Dallas. Did a much better job of competing with Dallas than the Eagles did, by the way. So you're going to Carolina. You're not going to be favored in that. And what's your next game? 4 days later, Tampa Bay and Tom Brady. You'd like to see the Jets show up someday, or something. It's just amazing.
December 5th, the Jets. December 5th, the Jets.
The Texans, give me the Texans. It's they really are in a little bit of trouble here. They've got to really get some things figured out pretty quick.
Well, is there some growth? Have we seen growth, Les? 30 points twice this year, 30 points 0 times last year. Now, you covered the Eagles for a long time. Last year had to have been one of the most aesthetically unpleasing teams ever. That was painful.
Right.
This is already a growth offensively, at least from last year, no?
Yeah, it is. It's hard to really evaluate Jalen Hurts. He's put up a lot of yards, but he's also had some really bad moments. That Dallas game was really a bad game for Jalen Hurts. But yeah, they have Devontae Smith. They have two really good running backs, I think, in Sanders and Gainwell. They have the tight ends. No one thought they'd still have Zach Ertz. He's still here along with Goddard. The offensive line, as usual, is, in a giant state of flux. But at least the guys they're bringing in as subs this year, except for Landon Dickerson, they all got a lot of playing time last year.
Right.
So it's not as bad a situation as it was a year ago on the O-line. So, yeah, there's growth offensively. It's not, the Kansas City game, I thought Kansas City was horrible defensively, and Atlanta was horrible defensively. So I want to see a lot more games. You don't have to play the best defense in the league every week and do well, but I'd like to see Hurts and the offense productive against some pretty good defenses before I get too excited. But that having been said, sure, yeah, there has been progress.
Now, Les, Andy Reid's first season, you were what the heck's this guy doing? Doug Peterson, the first year, you weren't even sure he was going to get through it. Both those guys, Andy was very good. Doug won a Super Bowl. Does Nick Sirianni show you, does he have the look or feel of the guy who's got some speed bumps but is going to figure this job out?
I can't say that I see that yet, Mike. I think he's a smart guy. I think he's a very decent person. I'm a little jealous of the people covering every day now because I never covered a coach who was willing to explain stuff and willing to talk through stuff as much as Sirianni is, and I really respect that. But the games, 1-3 with two horrible, blowout losses, it's too early. I mean, I'm not going to get way down on him right now, but I can't say that I see him coming out of this and looking great. Maybe. I think that's possible.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to say it's likely.
The 4 missing offensive linemen doesn't help. And as you mentioned, they're better on the offensive line because guys played a lot last year. But one of the, I guess, hopes was if those guys stayed healthy, Johnson, Brooks, Kelsey, Sayamala, Mailata, you had an offensive line. And with the line, you can open your playbook up and expand it. When you lose linemen, your playbook shrinks,
right.
And you wonder if they're going through that offense. I mean, their offense is scoring, but if that starts to shrink, and that you don't get the full brigade of what he wants his offense to be.
Yeah, and I think it affects your quarterback too.
Right.
That's a very good point you made. But just to expand on it, I think a big part of Wentz's catastrophic, falling apart last season was what happened to the offensive line, and he just came to feel he couldn't count on anything. He got back there and he was looking around and expecting to get hit. And, I think Hurts, if you can put Hurts in a position where obviously he does well when he's scrambling, but you don't want to have him scrambling a lot. You want to have him able to diagnose what's in front of him, get the learning process advanced there in terms of, this option, that option, there's another option over here. You don't want him running for his life all the time. And that was one problem I had with him in the Chiefs game. There was a little bit of what I call Kevin Cobb activity where he started scrambling backwards. And once you start running backwards as a quarterback, nothing good ever happens. Nobody ever threw a touchdown pass running 20 yards back and heaving the ball. Just throw it out of bounds before you start that, and you won't get called for grounding or whatever. But if you start running backwards, they've got you. You're dead. No receiver is going to, come back there to you and find you or anything like that.
Which is what we saw in that 4th and 11 where he's just running back and then he just throws it out of bounds. Let me ask you this, Les, as we'll let you roll here. The Wentz-Peterson demise, if you will, is it one of the most puzzling endings of all the endings that you've seen? It's been a lot of divorces here. Is this one of the most puzzling endings that we've seen?
Yeah, I have seen a few divorces. That is for sure. I saw Eric Lindros. I saw T.O. They're all weird. It was very puzzling. I still don't really understand it. Something went stale with Doug. Doug had a lot of credibility in the locker room, and that sort of dissipated over the course of last season, I think. And it really dissipated in that final game when, he didn't try to win against the Giants, really, against Washington. I don't get that. I don't get what happened to his creativity offensively. And I sure don't get what happened to Carson. 2017, there are people now who want to cast this as, he was only good for that 1 year. Well, no. He was very good in 2018 before the back injury. The team wasn't nearly as good. The weapons weren't nearly as good, but he was fine. There was nothing really wrong with him in 2018. 2019, he didn't take a step forward that I thought he would take, but he'd been hurt for 2 years. And then 2020, it just went from bad to worse, and it got to where it obviously was inside his head. He was such a private person and so closed off to us that I have no way of knowing really what that was all about, how it developed, what it meant. And that's a great frustration to me as a reporter. to be that far out of the loop. But I don't think anybody was in that loop.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going to happen with his career. He had a decent day yesterday, but the Colts aren't winning with him either. Obviously, they've got a giant injury situation seem to follow him wherever he goes now.
Les Bowen, the Eagles play Carolina on Sunday. A look back at that game against the Chiefs. You can check Les. He's doing some stuff with the Associated Press, filling in for Rob today. Rob will be back on Thursday at this time. Les, it's good to see you, my friend.
It's great to talk to you. Take care.